trademark and copyright attorney. I know we're going to talk about really cool patent stuff later. We have very fortunate to have somebody from the United States Patent and Trademark Office here. Patents are generally referring to inventions and methods. Copyright, we're talking about works of authorship, and we had some great examples. We were talking about like music, think books, paintings and such. And trademarks are referring to source identifiers. So those exist in connection with particularly goods or services. All three of these areas have a very important role in the music industry moving forward, and I'm going to really focus especially on trademark and copyright side. So Web3 and blockchain, have we heard about this? These are kind of buzzwords. Okay, so blockchain, generally we're talking about a ledger that exists. There's public, there's private blockchains. But in the context of some of the examples that we're going to talk about here, we're talking a lot about public blockchains. So things that you can actually see this ledger that's recording transactions and be able to view items like NFTs and how they can be moving from different, what we call wallets, so different accounts. So NFTs generally, NFT stands for non-fungible token, unique cryptographic token. It exists on the blockchain, can't be replicated. It's generally tied with either a digital item or a real world item. So the use cases have been really amazing, especially in the music industry, to see them tied, perhaps not even just with the actual music, but also artwork associated with the artist or videos. It's been really interesting to see. I'll get into some examples of people trading and selling these assets. They're also engaging and using this like a public address book. So a new way to engage with fans. So if you have this public ledger where people have bought into, for example, a collection that you released, all of a sudden it's like almost like having everybody's digital address where you can send them additional things in the future. For example, we call it airdropping NFTs, sending them tickets to a future event, or perhaps additional tokens or NFTs as something to just kind of appreciate your fans. Also, the fact that it is recorded on a public ledger is you're able to see when did they kind of hop on the bandwagon. There's this new data that we're able to play with, and I think it's very interesting to see how artists are using NFTs and connecting with their fans. And this is one example that I wanted to share. This photo is of Spotty Wi-Fi. I mean, I love the name. I think that he, got, I can't remember which came first, but this photo is of a crypto punk. This is owned by Yuga Labs, one of the biggest native Web3 companies. And so he belongs to this collection and uses this as the face of his collection, and it has spots on it. So I think maybe that's where we got the spotty Wi-Fi. I don't know. I call it Wi-Fi, but it's probably Wi-Fi. So forgive me if I say Wi-Fi. So just as an example, pretty interesting. In August 2021, he sold about 2,000 NFTs. In just 60 seconds, he generated about $192,000. We are seeing definitely a decline in NFTs, right? That was around the height of the market. The height was probably around November of 2021, maybe even some December. But he did another really interesting... Hello? He did another really interesting thing, especially when it comes to intellectual property. He gave owners of his NFT a copyright license. So it's like posting a piece of paper and saying, here's some things that you can get when you get my NFT. When you buy it, you're agreeing to it. Generally, that's kind of what we're seeing. So what this says really is very interesting, because when we're dealing with licensing on the copyright side, it's generally people getting together in a room, or nowadays, right, via email, sending a contract back and forth. There's some negotiation. But here, this was if you're interested, buy into my collection. So that is something that's relatively new and presents some really interesting legal issues related to copyright and contract law. But it also just opens up a lot of really interesting opportunities for people to be able to more easily license, especially more in the artwork. I think, as we know, I know there's some people in the music industry, copyright licensing is not so easy. I know I had somebody mention to me earlier, I'm just trying to get permission to use something, but this person was in another country, that the composer's in another country, and the person that owns these type of rights are somewhere else. And I mean, there's a lot of different hoops to jump through on the music copyright side. And so what's interesting here is you have a direct artist to fan, right? And there might not be some other rights holders in between, which is very interesting to think about. Also, we didn't talk about what a smart contract is, not a legal binding contract. But it's called a smart contract, and that's generally what's dictating how the NFTs are moving around. It's basically if this, then that's going to happen, that you can put together and instruct what might occur with some of these NFT collections. And it's interesting to think about using smart contracts to possibly make it really easier on the digital rights management side, right? So splitting royalties, for example. And I just wanted to give a quick example. I know we were getting into some 90s hip hop earlier. If we remember Bun B, he actually got together with Spotty Wi-Fi. They released a song, and I thought it was really interesting. It was a short license agreement, but it talked about musical composition, the sound recording with the vocals of Spotty, the sound recording with the vocals of Bun B, the video associated with the NFT, the artwork, even the public performance income that was coming, so streaming income thing. And it's really interesting to think about new ways that these different rights are being managed. There's a lot of possibilities, and there's a lot of tools for creators here in this space. And Water and Music NFT, their contract builder, if you are interested in diving into more of music and tech research, I definitely encourage you to check out Water and Music. They put a lot of research behind these areas and put out some really quality work. So I was alluding to getting fancy with these royalties through smart contracts, and there's still, right, a lot of questions around ownership, who owns what when you buy an NFT. And the biggest thing, I think, is looking at the terms and conditions. We see these little pop-ups come up. You click. How many of us read those, huh? Like, yeah, it's it pains me for somebody who writes them, right, to hear that. But I get it, right? I'm like, okay, Apple, you got me. I'm gonna, what am I gonna do? Not use this laptop I just bought, right? So, but if you're looking to try to understand ownership and permissions, right? If you didn't create something, that's a good place to look. And I thought that was, I think, a way of trying to get at that question earlier of who owns the output. It's something that is definitely worth looking at. But it also can maybe tell us a little bit more about, the royalty section. And I wanted to give this example. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to say the name of the song, but Rihanna, a big hit before her Super Bowl performance, somebody that had a producer actually created an NFT collection. He had streaming revenue from this particular song that's famous by Rihanna, and he sold 300 NFTs. Each owner of this NFT, so really redefining ownership and what we think about it, was given 0.0033% of the song's streaming royalties. So that producer made about $63,000 in revenue just by the sales of that, and there was some, promise, I'm saying this loosely, but of income to come from this around like a 6.5% return or something to that effect. I thought it was really interesting because, you know, the Super Bowl, which came out which was maybe 2 weeks after this release, the first song that they played was this, na, 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 right? It was, right? I know I'm a little shy. I don't know if it's because I have 2 little ones at home. Like, it's like a big, can't say these words anymore. Right. Better have my money. Right. That's right. It's so catchy. And I just laughed because this is really interesting because this is dollar signs, right? Dropping for this people. So really interesting. I'm not going to quite go into, there's some possible securities concerns with that. I am an IP attorney. But definitely interesting. You're seeing, I'm pointing out the experimentation, right? There's a lot of experimentation around these things. A lot of things are changing, and they're changing very quickly. And this is just another example with another American DJ making 11.7 million in selling only 33 NFTs from a 3-year anniversary of this. Also a big person in the space, if you've heard of Royal.io, but the idea of paying out royalty to collections, rewarding fans. It's pretty interesting if you're interested. But it's also worth noting and interesting to think about from the IP side of when you are drafting these agreements. So as you're drafting agreements with artists, or if you're an artist, agreeing to release certain rights, just think about these different use cases. Rights of publicity, so a cousin of intellectual property relating to name, image, and likeness and voice. Those are state specific, which, to add to the quagmire of us trying to figure out who owns things and who has control over things, there's that. But those things are usually contemplated in the agreement, and arguably probably the most important part of the agreement in addition to how much, right? So I think, if anybody is kind of signing agreements in the space, I would just say, think about how future tech might play an impact here. There was a lawsuit that was really just settled where the songwriter was suing 3Lao over sales of a particular song, claiming they weren't getting their portion of the generated income. That's not a particularly new issue, right? But it's just interesting to think about what we can be putting into our contracts to account for these new technologies. And Quentin Tarantino saw that in a lawsuit that was brought against him by Miramax when he was trying to release an NFT collection of related to Pulp Fiction. You remember that movie? Well, that contract was made in the 1990s, right? And then now we're looking here, does that apply to NFTs that are representative of a screenplay that wasn't released at that time? So it's again, not quite a new issue, but certainly things to think about as you may be looking into contracts and deciding what rights are important. It's to think about these emerging tech. And I'm going to just quickly go over artificial intelligence because I know we had a really great talk about AI, but how this relates to music, I think that it's important that we're following these current lawsuits going on related to image generators as well as like the chat GBTs, because what info are they trained on, right? So there's the kind of questions around how they're getting their data, and then what's actually the output and whether or not that can be protected by copyright. The Copyright Office has recently given some commentary on this, and I'm remiss in saying, just so you all know, I represent Midjourney, which is a text image artificial intelligence company. So I just, I wanted to mention that I do represent, a fairly large player, and they're also in a lawsuit right now that I think is pretty important to be following. Especially, there's a lot of parallels that can be made to the music world. But I also represent artists. So it's very interesting. My law firm, I get to do both sides. And there's really something very important going on in the Copyright Office right now is they're putting on some listening sessions. And I really loved the commentary I was hearing earlier, and I definitely encourage you all to look into that. For example, on May, I think it's 31st, they're going to be doing one specifically about music. There's one today on audiovisual works, and then later at the end of the month, there's going to be one specific to music where they're going to hear from different players in the music industry. And I'm not sure if you all saw the fake Drake that was going around, and UMG, who has been a major player in the blockchain space and also in AI as well. I don't think it's so surprising to know that a lot of, UMG, Warner, they have significant investments in a lot of these AI companies. And perhaps it goes to maybe some lessons we've learned from before is trying to stay ahead of things. But there was, when I heard about this, I'm like, well, what theory does UMG have to try to stop this fake Drake, right? If this is a brand new song, it doesn't sound like copyright. If this is so the melody is different, the lyrics are different. If this is just a brand new song, it just happened, it's using Drake's voice. Is UMG saying they own the rights to Drake's voice? And in what context? So that, again, I think that plays to this right of publicity issue, which refers to your ability to commercialize your own voice, name, image, likeness. We hear NIL a lot in the sports context, but those are patchwork laws in different states. Some states don't have any laws to address this. So it's definitely important that we're talking about this, that we're thinking about this, and that we're going to make some decisions, hopefully informed decisions, with the different players in the room. That's why especially I really liked the listening room idea that the Copyright Office is doing. Is it's not just the big players that are going to be in the room. I've found that they are also incorporating artists, composers, people, the little guys, I guess, or the ones that have to be represented by industry, and putting them in the room. So I don't think I have that much time, but but there's a lot of really interesting issues. I know we talked about kind of releasing your voice and seeing what happens. I just wanted to give some examples of that. And this is another one. David Guetta, about a few months ago, used AI to incorporate Eminem's voice in a song and just kind of put it out there to see what people said. And he's like, oh, it's okay, I didn't make a new song from, or record a new song from it, or something to that effect. And I'm like, oh goodness, there's all sorts of issues here, and a lot of, I guess we can call it experimentation, right? I haven't seen Eminem comment on this, but it was certainly interesting. And related to this is, more than ever, I think, is the brand protection element, because there might be some elements here to consider as we're having these AI conversations that maybe are not traditionally used. So I'm seeing a few more applications in the trademark office for sound recordings, for example. If it is a source identifier, it can function as a trademark. So trademarks can be words, so like the word Metallica as an example, or the specific logo. You see the specific logo, you think Metallica. If I say Coca-Cola, you can kind of see the script. Those aspects are protected under copyright law and can certainly apply not just to artist names, but maybe some other distinguishable aspects that you're able to distinguish source from. So I think I'm a little short on time, but I at least wanted to make sure to mention that, because I think that copyright definitely takes a lot of room in the IP conversation, the music context. But trademarks are also really just the heart of being able to protect yourself commercially as well. And Yeah, any questions on that? Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Or in your humble opinion on that, like where does ownership start and end, and where do you, once you put your voice out there and it's like if I want to put my voice out there as an NFT and now it's being used to advertise, I don't know, parking spaces or something, and I don't want that to be part of my brand, like how do you, where do you see this ending, or where you can pull the ownership of your voice back, because you don't want to be associated with that.
Yeah, you're right. And these are things that we consider very strongly in for brand protection, right? Is being able to control the quality of certain goods and services in association with your brand. So there are some parallels though from a trademark perspective. Fairness, right? It's very much focused on what's fair, what's equitable. I think like a first step would be looking at a federal right of publicity. It's very tricky though, because there's a lot of privacy aspects that go into right of publicity, and those are traditionally very much a power that the states maintain. So it's very hard to be able to advise clients on when something different can happen in one area and in another area. So that's why, like on contracts, you might see a choice of law provision. We want California law to apply. We want New York law to apply, things like that. So at least, you can look at right of publicity law there and try to get an idea. But it certainly kind of fits that definition of being able to commercialize your voice. Again, I think there's also some trademark aspects that, we could kind of get creative on. But it's not just, there's other ways that this is being used. I should mention like Jack Nicklaus, for example, famous golf player, right? Like how cool would it be to have a golf lesson with Jack Nicklaus? But Jack Nicklaus he's getting older and he can't be in a million places at once. Well, he created a digital twin. And I haven't looked into this recently to see if it's officially released, but this digital twin is able to give you golf lessons. And the idea is that it's AI assisted. And so think about in that context, somebody giving permission to give their voice to basically create a digital clone of yourself. I mean, it's just, there's so many possibilities. Also from like a memory standpoint, a loved one, right? Being able to remember a loved one that way. Maybe the AI can assist recognizing certain facial expressions or mannerisms or things that kind of help preserve. I mean, there's so many there, but from a legal perspective, I definitely, we go back to the contract side and we go back to, can there be some kind of federal, some consistency, something that we can point to and be able to go from there on? Yeah, great question. Yeah. Well, Jean-Marie, I want to say thank you so much, because this is really, it's been an amazing day. I'm looking forward to seeing the other speakers, and I wanted to thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so very much. It's a pleasure. A big applause for Jessica.